big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
So we're finally back in our natural habitats, I should say. I'm no longer at Halas Hall, which means I can speak a little bit more freely without having a member of the Bears security team or the PR team come and be like, what the hell are you talking about? What's up? Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. I'm Usayd Koshul. He's Nick Whalen. You can check us out on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, at Halas Beat, and at _ Nick Whalen. Dude, 72 hours since the draft's been over. We've had a lot of time to digest this. How are you doing, first off? I mean, we got a loaded show for our listeners today.
Yeah, I still feel a little exhausted. I feel like you do too from just draft coverage. I was in the front of a camera forever. You were at Halas Hall before we did some of our podcast. You would like give me a tour of Halas Hall, like virtually. It was pretty cool, but it is nice because I felt like a little bit of like all of the preparation for the draft that finally happened. I was like, okay, now I can just chill out and like listen to the press conferences, and now I've been able to absorb it, man, and I feel a lot better about it. Like day 3 was like the, like day 1, day 2, we had 3 second-round picks, and then day 3 was like, oh, we had this stuff happen. But the more I've looked into it, the better I feel. How about you, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good. And just for perspective here, like I had a weight room on, so I covered the draft Thursday night, okay? Then I had weight room on Friday morning, which was like a 5 a.m. to sort of like 7 a.m. type deal. So I'd been up since like 4:30, and I came home, took like a 30-minute nap, showered, and then was on the road. And Halas Hall, like for me from where I live, is like a 50-mile drive almost. But with that Friday afternoon traffic, as I'm sure our listeners in the Chicagoland area know, that Friday afternoon traffic on 9094/294 is some of the most brutal stuff on the planet. Combine that with a construction, and I'm like literally on, stuck at a stoplight, like 10 miles from Halas Hall, and I'm like avidly texting, our publisher Zach, and I'm like, I promise I'll be there. Like, I will be there before they pick at 39, and then obviously 39 happens, they take Luther Burden. 41 they trade out of. So this was it was a loaded and jam-packed weekend, first off, because I didn't get home till about 1 in the morning on a Saturday, and I was back up at about 7, 8 a.m. going for a 3.5-mile walk before getting back up to Halas Hall. But it was, to me, this draft was interesting because there's a lot of like things that people loved. There's probably more stuff that people hated. And to me, I'm kind of just like, this is all a overreaction / like in the moment type thing where I'm just like, people are just overreacting to overreact.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like what we go off of for players is, a fraction of what they know when they go off of players. I think the one thing was interesting from Ben Johnson's comments of how, how has he learned Ryan Poles and the team of Chicago through the draft process, and Poles said the same thing about what he learned about Ben. But Ben Johnson said, I learned how patient that Ryan Poles was, and he's like, I was surprised at how patient they were and just letting the board come to him. And he said, even drafting guys, we were all in agreement, but drafting guys that we liked over sometimes passing up needs, which I thought was interesting. So, there, and I know people talk about we should have gotten this position or that position. We'll get into all that stuff, y'all. Maybe not even this episode, maybe future episodes, but it was something I took from the pressers, that I could physically see them doing it. Because speaking directly of Luther Burden, I mean, they didn't need a receiver, but they must have had like a top 20 grade on the guy. They're like, we cannot just let this guy go to pick 40, and we might not get him at 41. That's the other thing. If like they're like, hey, we really could get this guy here, and then maybe Luther falls to 41. They're like, no, we just have to take him because he's such a good talent.
Yeah, and so see, part of the whole thing for me, right, was like, everyone's pissed off, by the way, that the Bears didn't draft a running back inside the top 100 in this draft. But it's also just like, you can't take a running back if a running back's not on the board. So it's like, to kind of round out the entire conversation here, right? Like, maybe the Bears were targeting and hoping that Travion Henderson or one of the Ohio State guys falls to 39, right? That obviously didn't happen. So you can't get mad at the Bears for not taking a player that was never on the board to begin with. And yes, the Bears, I can tell you guys right now, based on everything I was hearing that Thursday, the Bears were one of the teams that had gotten on the phone with Jacksonville and Cleveland. Now, obviously, the reality of it is this, is that for other teams around the league, they're not stupid, right? They're like us. They're looking at, okay, what draft capital does this team have? What can we realistically get in terms of a compensation package? Because this is like, hey, I'm the Cleveland Browns. I'm putting together a trade package of what I'd like to see from the Chicago Bears. And then, Nick, you're the Chicago Bears. Now you're trying to put a trade package together and say, what would we send over to Cleveland or to Jacksonville in a sense? And so teams are running through all these possibilities. And like at the end of the day, giving up any of the 2 second-round picks in a draft where the meat of this draft was really the second, third, fourth round was just going to be too valuable to prove. And just to play devil's advocate here, maybe we look back at this thing in 3 years and be like, hey, fans were pretty stupid for overreacting and being like, why are you not taking a running back? Because you got Ozzie Trapilo, a 6'8" lineman that could play every position but center. You just got Shamar Turner, who, by the way, was being labeled as a first-round talent by a lot of people, but ultimately fell simply because of that weird sort of run on some of the offensive linemen / running backs at the start of the second round. But it's also just like, you got a Luther Burden who for 2 years now has been ranked as a top 20 prospect and probably should have been a first round pick. But again, you look at it and it's like they went into this draft with, we know these are our needs, but if the board presents itself in a certain way, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this instead.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing that's calmed me down is this. The talk going into the draft for literally months was Ashton Genty, right? And it was like, you have to get him because he's so good. And then you have the other crowd, right, saying running back is so deep, but also it's not a premium position, right? So if you drafted him, he'd be the fifth highest paid running back or ninth highest paid running back, depending on where they got him. You look at what they did in the second round, y'all. Okay, first off, they made the trade, which, I liked, honestly, because if you don't like the guy that's there, you trade down. That allows you to move up into a pocket that you liked, and you got a fourth, which, people don't like the fourth round pick. It was an extra guy anyway. Like, it was the guy they weren't going to have. So that's another part. But you look at the 3 picks. Let's just look at positions, Usayd. Wide receiver, offensive tackle, and 3 technique. All 3 of those are premium positions. So if we look at, the positions they didn't get, edge is one. That's premium. I'll give you that one. They didn't get an edge. But safety and running back until really late, those are not premium positions. So if you look at just in terms of the monetization that they got in the second round in this draft, they could be very, very valuable when we look at this 2-3 years down the line in terms of what did this. Now, again, people might not like the players themselves. The more that I've looked at it, I don't mind the players. I'm not crazy about Ozzie, but it makes sense. But Luther Burden, 5-star guy, huge ceiling, very young. Turner, 5-star guy, huge ceiling, very young. Man, these could be like home run picks at premium positions, which could be, these guys should be making $20-25 million a year by the end of their rookie contracts.
Yeah, and if you are wondering what our initial thoughts on Luther Burden, Ozzie Trapilo, or even Shamar Turner were, as well as Zay Frazier, check out the episode that we did before this. It's posted on YouTube, but any podcast platform as well, where we literally broke all this stuff down as soon as their press conferences were over from Saturday. But
can I dive into that quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, it's easy after a guy gets picked, y'all. YouTube.com, right? Log in, Luther Burden highlights, right? Like, everybody does it, okay? Like, even Ben Johnson, his presser was like, what do you think of him? He's like, stud. He's like, have you seen the highlights? Right? Like, even he said it, right? For, the reporters, and Usayd was there. But I watched 7 of his all 22 games, some from 2023, some from 2024. And it's going to be bad. I'll put something on Twitter of like just different videos I just watched of him. And some were big plays. Some were just like smart things that I saw that he did. he's better than I thought, man. Like, I don't think he's necessarily superstar Justin Jefferson, but he's good and he's so young. And there's things you can see where he gets it. There's good technique because some of the things are like he's raw, he's just after the catch guy, but like good hands catcher. I saw some really good releases and routes. I mean, there was a play, man, where he had this like deep cross and the safety came at him like full shot, hit him. Burden just bounced off of him, ran, broke a tackle, and got 10 more yards. Or, and there's times where he's not good after the reception in terms of like he makes a move just to make a move, but he doesn't really read the guy, if that makes sense. Like Cordell Patterson would like read the guy and make the move off of a guy. So sometimes Luther Burden will make a move and just run into the guy. I'm like, okay, what are you doing? But he's slippery and he's tough to tackle most of the time. And so anyways, I just want to say, like, I dove into the tape a bunch. Okay, I'm not going to go like crazy here, but like I was more impressed. So like going to after the episode we recorded, I was, 7 more games. I was like, dude, the Bears got themselves a really good player.
Well, and the other thing I don't think people realize is this for the, hey, why'd you take a wide receiver crowd? I mean, the Bears were bringing in receivers for top 30 visits. Now, I understand that Isaiah Bond is a player that is still undrafted, a guy who probably should have gone back to school for at least another year just to get a little bit more seasoning. But it's like they brought him in for a top 30 visit. There's a couple other smaller school players that they brought in for a top 30 visit. And so, see, Luther's projection in this offense gets really interesting because to me, yeah, he's like 6 foot 206. I don't see him as being a purely slot guy. Okay. One of the big things that NFL teams do is they like to stack and have 3 really good wide receivers. And what they love to do is by stacking talent at that position, you are basically creating a offense where you can run 10, 11, 12 personnel, but you take those 3 receivers and you line them up at F, or you line them up at X, or you line them up at Z. It's interesting because a lot of times when we look at Ben Johnson's offense, and I was watching some of his All-22 films sitting at Halas Hall, but like what happens is Ben Johnson loves to run trips to the field side, okay? And that pretty much means that the trips is going to line up depending on where the ball is. Those 3 receivers are going to be running to where there's a ton of green grass, all right? They're never going to go ahead and run trips to the short side just because, again, to me, it's a fireable offense if you're running trips to the short side. We'll just leave it at that. But I think
you're not an FIB fan?
I feel like the formation into boundary works, but your formation into boundary is going to work when you have some sort of like GT or GY reverse counter built off of it, okay?
I like that. Which Ben Johnson has.
Exactly, right? The Washington playoff game was a formation into the boundary, and it was a GT counter reverse, I believe it was, which is where Luther Burden's going to come in. But again, you as an offense, offenses don't just stretch the field vertically with guys like their long speed. Like that's the role of a guy like a DJ Moore, okay? Or even a Rome Odunze. Luther Burden can do that as well. But the best offenses are the ones where there's 3 different layers built, right? So number 1, how does your running game mirror your passing game? Okay, that's the most basic thing. That is people attribute it to being a Sean McVay principle, but it should really be a just general, if you're a good offensive coordinator principle. So how does your run game, the run blocking, set up your pass protection, okay? Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. The second thing, okay, is that how does your vertical passing game sort of mirror what you are looking to do in the vertical running game, right? Vertical to vertical, okay? The third thing to me is how does your vertical game in terms of your vertical horizontal passing game, how does that mirror any horizontal running game you're going to have? You have to figure out a way to kind of make those 6 components fit together. And when you got a playmaker like Luther Burden, that blows open your offense like crazy.
Yep. Then you add in play action into that one. You add in shifts, motions, and all of the things that you're talking about is to put the defense in hesitation of like what they see, and they hesitate for a half second, and then all of a sudden your receiver has a step and there's an opening, you get a play. Like the thing that I like is I know people are worried about like, well, how many targets is Luther Burden going to get? And then what about Cole Kmet? And then what about Rome Odunze? Like you go through the list of the guys. I don't care. imagine being a defensive coordinator now, and you're facing Chicago, and you're like, oh my gosh, like what? How am I going to stop this play and this play when there's threats everywhere? And that's the point, y'all. The point is they're going to be stretching and just threatening the defense everywhere. That guys are going to be open. It's basically what we thought last year was going to be, but Keenan Allen couldn't move as well as he could, right? But now you're like +1 to that because you have Colston Loveland, right? And you have a competence not right. One of the best play callers. We can call Ben Johnson that, running the show. So to me, that's the thing that I think about with this wide receiver group is that they all can have these package of plays that you're trying to install every week. Where like, hey, this is going to be the number one read on this. But then if that's not there, you look backside, guys are going to be open because they're more talented this year. So to me, that's like the most exciting part for this wide receiver group. I'm not going to get into, the DJ Moore, was Ben Johnson talking to him or Rome Odunze, all that stuff, because they're all going to be here, y'all. DJ Moore's not leaving Chicago in 2025. Okay. So like, we don't even need to talk about it. But to me, I think what it means is it means that defenses are going to be much more under anxiety preparing for Chicago, which means everyone's going to eat.
Well, I mean, did you see the tweet where someone said like, "Oh, the Bears should trade Rome Odunze or DJ Moore"? I mean, that was
people are going to say everything anyway. So
yeah, I mean, so here's the thing.
How about your boy thinking they had to get Loveland and Burden because Caleb can't throw down the field?
Yeah, I mean that stuff was interesting. Where I took like the 12-second clip of Caleb, I think hitting that like 45-yard touchdown with 5.5 minutes to go in that Thanksgiving showdown against Detroit. And people are like, oh, well, this is just one clip, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, does prove he can throw down the field. But
that was on Brian Branch too, right?
Exactly, yeah. Former second-round pick / like Alabama safety Brian Branch.
Like Pro Bowler, like all-pro level guy.
Exactly. But I mean, again, we'll get into Caleb and this draft class in future episodes because trust me, throughout the month of May, we're going to have tons of draft stuff for you guys. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I find to be so fascinating is Ozzy Trapilo. Now, to me, I mean, I was sitting there on Friday night and I'm like, whoa, this is a pick I didn't expect. But here's some fun facts to know, okay? First off, it's the 4th straight year that the Bears have drafted an offensive lineman. It is the 3rd straight season that the Bears have drafted a 3rd straight draft, I should say, where the Bears have drafted an offensive lineman in the top 100, which again is some stuff that's never ever been heard of. The next thing I think is really worth noting is that Ozzy played some tight end, so I do see him being played tight end when he was in high school, so I'm sure he has the hands to be able to catch if he needs to, even though it's been a couple of years. But you're getting a guy who, again, some people are going to say is the worst draft pick on the planet, but is a player who can play every position on the O-line except for center. And by the way, for anyone who thinks that Ozzy Trapilo is just going to be a swing tackle, I do not necessarily buy into that hype at all, simply because I feel like the whole argument of, so-and-so is going to end up being, isn't a starter, is just going to end up being a really good swing tackle. I feel like we use that for Karan Amagaji, and now we're using it for Ozzy Trapilo. And so it's becoming something where it's like any offensive lineman, especially tackle that the Bears take, that doesn't end up being a good starter, which there's no definition of what a good starter is, all right? It's just labeled as, oh, he could be a good swing tackle.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is we don't know how this development works, y'all. Like Dan Rochar is new, Ben Johnson is new, and they drafted this guy in the 2nd round ahead of Shamar Turner, ahead of a lot of the guys they could have picked for a reason. Like they like him. That's why they got him. His RAS, by the way, for being a 6'8" guy is 8.85. Pretty good. To me, I think this spells a couple of things. One is, and Ryan Poles said this in the press conference. He said, we've had to shuffle the O-lines so much that we want to have some consistency. And Ozzy is a guy that hasn't been hurt a whole lot, and he doesn't hold, right? He doesn't get penalized a lot. So you think about like consistency in terms of, offenses driving down the field, et cetera. But even for this year, if you have 4 solid to good offensive tackles, that's a good problem to have, y'all. But I think it speaks really one thing to this whole conversation of what this means. And I know people want to like, and we could get into this if you want, but like now Darnell Wright has to move to left because he can only play right and, you know, all this kind of stuff. I think it says one thing for sure. It says that Braxton Jones is gone after this year because you don't spend a second round pick on a tackle to play backup. And then you spend whatever it's going to cost, 18, 20, 22 million to re-sign Braxton Jones, and you still have Kron Amagaji. Like, to me, having and spending the draft capital and money to have 4 tackles doesn't make sense to me. So that was when he got drafted. That was the one thing right away I was like, oh, they don't want to re-sign him, which in the whole scheme of things, people talked about all the time anyway. We have to get Calvin Banks because we don't want to pay Braxton Jones. That whole theory doesn't go away because now this guy was just a second round pick. That still is the same thing. Like, they don't, as you said, they're not drafting him to be a backup right tackle for 4 years. Like, that's not going to be the plan, y'all.
Well, the other thing I think really has to be said is it's like you could have taken Ozzie Trapilo at 41st overall, right? So you could have, let's just say the Bears don't trade out of 41. They sit there. You could have had Luther Burden plus Ozzie Trapilo at 39, 41. But the fact that you traded back almost 15 spots to 56, then you went ahead and you still took him, just goes to show that you don't really give a damn about his draft status, Ozzie's draft status. At this point, you are looking for a true upgrade because we know what Braxton is at this point. Ben Johnson's seen Braxton Jones up close for the last couple of years. When coaches get hired, one of the first things that they have to do is start to evaluate the tape. I mean, they've evaluated the tape enough that the Bears are not in this like roster evaluation / tape evaluation mode, right? They're going to go ahead, they're going to look at what specifically a guy like Braxton Jones is going to bring to the table, but then what a guy such as Ozzie Trapilo is going to bring to the table. And to me, to your point about like, yeah, Braxton's going to be gone after this year. I mean, again, we'll talk about that in future episodes, but I'm just going to leave it at this, and we will revisit this thought as well. You took Ozzie Trapilo at 56 simply because, number one, he was the best player on your board at that time. Number two, you believed that he could be significantly better in 2 to 3 years' time than what Braxton Jones has shown in 3 years at this point. Plus, I think that the Braxton Jones injury is pretty serious. And yeah, while he's going to be ready to go for training camp, I honestly don't think he's athletic enough to overcome like that gruesome of an injury and return to his old form.
See, and I think that's a good point too, is that they were talking about, who's it, Brandon Thorne, that Ozzie's the most pro ready. And I think that they even said something like that in the press conference, either Poles or Ben Johnson, in terms of this is someone that could contribute right away. And to me, that gives us some comfort. That also has a little bit of concern with Kron Amagaji, who is someone that I have a little bit more faith in than most people. But even if both of them are battling for left tackle while Braxton comes back, or as you're talking about, what if Braxton's 80% of what he was? That's really going to hurt his game. That the Bears have some security, y'all. Like, isn't this what we talked about? They have to go trenches. They have to get O-line. What if injuries happen? The Bears did it. And then they did it. Now people are like, yeah, but not that guy. Like, I feel like people are mad about it. I'm like, this is a good thing. We invested a second round pick in a tackle that is consistent, doesn't have penalties, and has played both left and right tackle. I think it's a solid pick. I don't think it's like a superstar pick. This isn't going to be, I know people wanted Will Campbell. This isn't like that level, but this guy could be a starter.
And I'm going to say, because you talked about wanting Will Campbell, I mean, personally, like, I'm in the camp of you can't want a player that's not on the board as soon as the draft begins. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. But see, the other thing that I found to be so interesting throughout this whole process is the fact that it's like the Bears have had their eyes on some of these prospects for a couple of years at this point, where first off, the Bears have connections at the University of Michigan. Okay. And the reason that to me is so significant is because it's like, see, a lot of times teams have connections at various sort of, schools all over the place, right? Like just one of the things that I think is consistently known. But there was someone in the Bears front office, I forgot the exact name, that had left to kind of take a position in Green Bay. I'm sorry, not in Green Bay, at the University of Michigan. And so the reality of that specifically is that it's like, that the Bears are calling up their contacts at it was Sean Maggie, right, who's coaching chief of staff, who accepted the gig at the University of Michigan, right? And he's currently Michigan's GM. And so it becomes this whole situation where it's kind of just like the Bears were talking to people at Michigan for 2 years about Colson Loveland. Trey Koza, who's the Bears director of player personnel, is a Boston College alum, believe it or not. Now, Trey had mentioned specifically to us, he's like, yeah, Ryan Poles and I went to Boston College, and we've had our eyes on Ozzie Trapilo for the last couple of years. Ben Johnson's a guy who's a Boston College alum as well. He was there for, I think, 1 or 2 years after Ryan Poles had actually graduated, was working as a scout for Kansas City at that point. And so it's like, the Bears have had their eyes on these guys for the last couple of years, which clearly means that last year when they were looking at some of these Texas prospects, such as a Byron Murphy, some of the A&M guys like Shamar Turner also jumped off the screen.
Which, by the way, is someone that grew up with Byron Murphy. That's a fun fact for Shamar Turner and Byron Murphy. Yeah, and I'm with you. And that's something that is the things that people don't think about, is like they put so much time in this. Like, guys, a long time ago when I was at Western Kentucky, I would talk to scouts because they're right there. They ask you questions. They want to know, hey, how does this guy practice, whatever. And I was a nobody on staff, y'all. I was like the grunt worker. They get a lot of information. And they talked about with Colson Loveland, you specifically, because you mentioned him, they were like, they want to know, how does he treat the equipment guys? How does he treat the medical staff? How does he treat the janitors, whatever? They want to know what kind of person this is. So yeah, I think that stuff is really telling. The one thing that I think about overall with if we're talking about just the second round picks, because we could say day 2, but we had 3 second round picks, which, by the way, I think I heard that's the first time the Bears have ever had 3 second round picks, which I think is kind of cool, is the floor has been raised so much on this team. Like you had Loveland, right? So that's already there, but you had Burden in there. Like think of receiver. There's really no fear of like an injury at wide receiver now. It's like, oh yeah, we got an extra guy in there now. And you still have Zacchaeus, you still have Duvernay, you still have Tyler Scott, even beyond there. You have Turner at tackle, which you have Dexter, Billings, Grady Jarrett, who, by the way, I think Grady Jarrett is such a great mentor for Shamar Turner in terms of like personality, the juice that he brings to harness that, shooting gaps. When I watch him play, man, I get a feeling of that. If you watch him lock out and use his hands, he's such violent with his hands, just like Grady Jarrett. And then Ozzie Trapilo like really brings the floor up for the offensive line, which has been a fear for the past few years. Like you talk about like how is this really going to impact the team? I feel security myself, Nick Whalen, right? I hope that you guys do, because while you don't have the superstar running back now, you don't have, this or that in the key positions, guys for Caleb to throw to, for Ben to have fun plays with, to protect Caleb, give him time to throw, which was an issue last year, and to stop the run and get after the quarterback. We added 3 quality guys to that area. We're not even talking about the first round pick.
Our draft coverage, I should say, it's not going to be sporadic. It's not going to be all over the place, but we're going to be breaking down a lot of different things for you over the course of the next couple episodes, because, I mean, there's so much to discuss with this roster inside out. Like, we're not going to be like other podcasts and just be like, oh, yeah, they got a tight end, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, we're going to get in-depth this. But, okay, so we talked about the process of, teams looking at scouts over a number of years. Did you see the comment that Ben Johnson made regarding Colson Loveland at all? And just looking at Michigan players from the past?
No, what did he say?
So he said this. He's like, so someone had asked him, right, about like if hey, Ben, when you were in Detroit, did you sort of pay more attention to Michigan, the University of Michigan? Because it's like Ann Arbor's a couple hours from Detroit. And he's like, yeah, not necessarily. I mean, when we're studying other players like JJ McCarthy, yeah, he flashed immediately. He was all over the tape. So that gets me thinking like Ben Johnson sort of went into the 2024 pre-draft process and was actively studying JJ McCarthy just as a way of like getting a portfolio lined up for this would be my process for evaluating a NFL quarterback that's likely going to go in the first round, which again, JJ's time in first off, I'm excited for the JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams matchups that we're going to see over the next couple of years, simply because I think that JJ is a perfect fit in Kevin O'Connell's offense, which is a variation of the Sean McVay offense, which is a variation of the Kyle Shanahan offense, which is a very friendly quarterback offense, which is why Brock Purdy is now being talked about as becoming one of the highest paid players in the league. But what's so interesting to me about this whole process is that there are some of these prospects on the Bears' radar, right, that I suddenly look at and like you brought up the point, right, of like running back or this haul. I mean, I think I'd be pretty confident in saying with the way that the weekend played out, and I get hindsight is 2020, but I'd rather have the Bears' first 4 picks over trading up for a running back at this point. Like, I know you're a big Ashton Genty guy, and I was split on Ashton Genty, but like, give me Luther Burden plus Trapilo plus Shamar Turner plus Colson Loveland over just Ashton Genty.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you because the more, and again, I love Genty. I think you would be definitely a difference maker. But if you did that, you would feel vulnerable at a lot of positions on the team. And you know, the other part of this whole conversation is like the domino effect that it has on the other guys, right? Like I'll take an easy one, okay? So you added Shamar Turner, which makes you really deep at D tackle. To me, I think that means that now Chris Williams, who you gave $3.2 million, I think, to no guaranteed money, is can now be expendable. You can cut him, you can let him go. He can be a camp cut. And now you save $3.2 million because he would be your 5th or 6th D tackle, depending on how you feel about Zach Pickens, who I think also could be expendable, right? But now all of a sudden, as they talked about, they want to increase the competition in those rooms. We don't know what'll happen. Maybe Chris Williams is like, I'm going to be an animal this offseason, and I'm going to come into camp so much better. Same with Zach Pickens. Good. That's a good thing for the Chicago Bears because these guys are going to be better. Or they're like, you know what? I'm going to drop a little weight and I'm going to try to be D-end, whatever it may be. But like when you do that at all of these positions, man, like I feel like better than it would be to get one guy who I do think Ashton Genty could be a superstar. So I'm completely with you, man. But now there's expendable pieces everywhere. You know, you can talk about wide receiver, like does Tyler Scott make the team? Does Devin Duvernay make the team? I mean, he would be the returner, but Luther Burden can return. You go through all these positions, and I feel like it changes things. Now, it does all the time, but when you added 4 high-quality guys, it changes versus one guy.
And see, that's where I think the argument gets also a little bit polarizing because some people are going to be like, well, we as in referring to the Bears. I mean, I try not to say we at all, just because it's like, to me, when people say we, I'm like, you're saying you're a part of the team, but you're not actually part of the team, because I'm in this camp of like fans are not part of the team. Okay,
I have a hot take on that.
All right, go ahead.
I'm 100% with you because you coach high school, right? I coach high school. I coach college too. When people said that, I would almost get offended. Not because I don't appreciate the support, and not that people aren't dedicated to this stuff. And I get it. You guys are listening to a Bears podcast in April or May because you're dedicated. I get it. But like in college, man, like you're talking about you're up at 5:30 a.m. for a lift in the off season for your high school program. Same thing in college. Late nights, recruiting visits, like all this stuff. And people see game day. I get you're excited about that, but like the thousands of hours that I put in, I'm like, I feel like that's different. I feel like that's a we. You get to have like the fun and cheer part of it. So I get that part of it, and I know that's a touchy subject for some people, but I'm 100% with you on it.
I mean, all I'm going to say is this. I would love to see people get up at 4:30, 3 days a week to get to weight room to get ready and be at weight room by 5:45, get the lift in from 6 to 7, go work a full day, and then have like after school, throwing and routes and all that for another hour, which as a coach you want to be there as much as there's days where I'm like, I'd love to just go home. And then, go grab dinner real quick, maybe hop on with some guy named Nick Whalen, record quick episode, and then go ahead and get downstairs for the youth clinic from 6 to 7, and then come home. So it's very long hours that we put in, which can be another summer episode. But okay, so see, to me, looping this thing back in here, and we'll talk about the Bears, day 3 picks on another episode, just because we're not putting those guys on the back burner. But the second round to me is just so integral that some of the other guys on day 3, like Hippolyte, such as Kaya Monagnai, Jay Frazier, Luke Newman, they're all kind of deserving of their own episode in general, because we want to discuss what they bring to this team. The last thing I'm going to say here is this, dude, is to me, I mean, looking at the offensive tackle competition, Ben Johnson kind of blew this thing wide open, because he was like, well, as a staff after the weekend, we'll kind of get back in there and we'll see how all these guys fit. So I think he's really saying that, like, the left tackle job is anyone's to win at this point. It's anyone's to lose.
Yeah. And also, I mean, that's the whole don't know right tackle, debate that's circulating now. But again, that's a good problem to have. Like, what if Karan Magaji comes out and he's like, I finally am healthy with my quad, and I have to step up my game because they just drafted this guy. I mean, this is essentially the same thing that the Eagles did, right? The Eagles do this all the time. They drafted, I'm trying to think of the guy that didn't work out, I think as a first round pick. And then Jordan Mailata, right, then emerged as this, rugby guy as their left tackle. But there's like, that's fine because it's good competition. The other guy that was a first round pick didn't work out. Andrew Dillard is who I'm thinking of. But that's good because your room is competing against each other to be the best, and that helps the Eagles. It's the same thing with Chicago. So, yeah, I think it is interesting. The best guy will win the left tackle job. That also is motivating Braxton Jones to get healthy, right? To do all of his rehab, to do all of the extra stuff. So, yeah, man, I'm excited. Those because we expected 2 early second round picks, which morphed into 3 picks, 1 early, 2 late. But man, it made the Bears a much better team.
Well, I gotta ask you this, dude. Would you rather, if you were basically going on paper, irrespective of the prospects drafted, I mean, would you want to have in this draft class 39 and 41 or 39, 56, 62?
So it'd be 39, 41, 72, right? Versus, yeah. To me, looking at like, and again, I know it's hindsight. Looking at how it played out, I would rather have what Chicago had, because you look at the players picked. So the Bills traded for TJ Sanders, the D tackle from South Carolina, and then it went Mason Taylor, Alfred Collins, the two D tackles, Ezaraku, who I thought was a steal there, Tulamalu, Will Johnson fell. But then, like, if the Bears were desperate at tackle, Arante Irsay went, and then the Packers got Belton. Like, the Bears waited and still got value because I think they saw the pockets that were there, because I still saw, I mean, like, again, like Mike Green went after the Bears had their pick. Tate Rutledge went after RJ Harvey. So, like, if they really wanted the back, if they were like, we have to get it back, we're like desperate, like our team is terrible, they would have reached for RJ Harvey there. Or instead of Shamar Turner, they would have taken Caleb Johnson. But they didn't. They just kept getting, as you said, best player available. And to me, that's what good teams do. I respect that. That's how you make your team better, not by reaching and taking Velus Jones because we have to have a receiver for Justin Fields. We saw how that played out.
That was a very interesting draft, by the way. But we're going to get out of this thing. We've gone for a little bit longer. Like I said, we're going to have a ton more draft coverage over the next 3 to 4 episodes. We're not just going to be giving you guys like, oh, the Bears took a linebacker, the Bears took a center prospect, the Bears took a running back in the 7th round. Like, we're really going to get into the depth and the weeds of what all this stuff really means. So make sure you keep it locked into the Bear Report YouTube channel, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and review. Check out the Halas Beat on Twitter at Halas Beat. Check us out on Twitter at Usayd Koshul at _Nick Whalen. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be recording Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you're hearing this episode on a Wednesday. We'll have another episode out for you guys on a Friday morning, where we talk about the Bears' other 4 draft picks in relation to how the board fell, plus the strategy, a whole bunch of really good stuff. Until then, though, make sure you guys bear down and enjoy your week, because it's going by quickly.